Hi, this is Mr. Bright again. I'm going to be taking you through order of operations here, try and do it fairly quickly, and we'll see how this lesson goes. So order of operations is all about doing the basics of adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, exponents, things like that, and in what order do we do them in. And in essence, we as human beings only know how to do addition. So a problem like this, 2 plus 3 equals 5, is pretty standard. This is a problem that we're all familiar with and we understand how to do. Well, when subtraction came along, we realized that actually subtracting is the same thing as adding a negative. So when we have 2 minus 3, this is equivalent to 2 plus a negative 3, which gives us an answer of negative 1. Now, I'm not necessarily teaching about positives and negative numbers, but I'm merely pointing out that subtraction is equivalent to addition. In fact, we often say that subtraction really means adding the opposite. So subtracting and adding kind of have the same rank, if you will. They're equivalent in nature. Well, then because we're human beings, we decided to get a little bit lazy, and we wanted to have a shorthand because we knew that there were some times where there were lots of problems that were longer, that we might need something better, a better way to do that. So let's say that we had 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. Well, we decided to shorten that and we'd say, well, there are 5 3's there, and that's how we came up with multiplication. So we said this is really 5 times 3, which is 15. And so multiplication is really just a shorthand notation for addition. But it is a shorthand. And then we notice that division is the same thing as multiplication. For example, 16 divided by 2 we know is 8. But division is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So this is the same thing as 16 times half, which is equal to 8. So in other words, the multiplication and division are also equivalent. But they both happen to be shorthand notation of addition. So we started with addition and subtraction on this lower level, and then we decided when things got more complicated we moved up to multiplication and division. And then we said, well, what if we have really complex multiplication problems? So if instead of all these 3's adding, what if we were multiplying them? And so if we turn these into a multiplication sign, we said, well, there's got to be a shorthand way to write this problem. And instead of 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, we simply write this with exponents, and we say that's 3 to the 5th power. So exponents are really shorthand for multiplication, which is shorthand for addition. So again, we start on our ladder here. Addition and subtraction are down here, multiplication and division, and then exponents are up here. Now, because of that system, we decided it would be useful in any math problem that if we wanted to call attention to something, that maybe we should have another symbol. And so we just use parentheses, and we call that a grouping symbol. So if we had a problem, maybe 2 plus 3 plus 4, we might say, hey, look at this 3 plus 4 first. That's the important thing. That's what we want to be aware of. Our attention is drawn to that first by those parentheses there, or the grouping symbol. This leads us to what are actually the order of operations, the order in which we do things. And so what we do is we start with those grouping symbols. And the P stands for parentheses. So, but it could be parentheses, it could be brackets, it could be the curly braces. It's any sort of grouping symbol is that P for parentheses. That's what it draws our attention to something. Included in the grouping symbol is actually a fraction bar, because if we had a fraction that said 2 plus 3 over 5, we would want to do this addition on top of the fraction bar before we divide it by the 5 that's in the denominator. So that actually counts as a grouping symbol as well. So these are the things that draw our attention to it first thing. The parentheses is normally what we would say, hence I have the P. The E stands for the exponents. Those happen next because those are the most complicated things. So if we had 3 to the 5th power, remember that that was shorthand. 3 to the 5th power was up here on the ladder. That was shorthand for multiplication, which was shorthand for addition and subtraction. So this is the next most complicated thing. And so that's going to happen next. Then we saw that multiply and divide were equivalent. So multiplication or division, whether it's 16 divided by 2 or 16 times a half, those are the same thing. Multiplication and division are equivalent. Those are the next most complicated things. Remember, addition and subtraction were down here. Multiplication and division were shorthand for that. So that's the next most complicated thing after exponents. And then finally, the very basic bottom level stuff is our addition and subtraction. So something like 5 minus 17 would come at the end. Now, why is this important? This is important because these are the order in which we perform operations in any given problem. So let me give a couple example problems before we close. Most problems will look something like this. 2 plus 3 times 5 minus 2 to the 3rd power. Here's a typical problem. Remember, we only know how to add, really. Everything else is just shorthand in here for some sort of addition. And so we look at the problem and we say, well, what's the most complicated thing? Well, nothing draws my eye. There's no parentheses or grouping symbols that I have to worry about that says, do this first. That's what those parentheses mean. But then we look and we say, well, what's the most complicated thing? Well, that's clearly the exponent. Because remember, the exponent is shorthand for multiplication, which is shorthand for addition and subtraction. So we're going to do that first. So I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite everything about this problem, except I'm going to write out what 2 to the 3rd power actually is, which is 2 times 2 times 2, so that is 8. Now I look and I say, okay, after exponents, the next most complicated things were multiplication and division. So I look and I see, is there any multiplication or division? And there is. There's 3 times 5. So I go ahead and do 3 times 5, which is 15. And now I'm at the bottom layer, which is addition and subtraction. And I'm just going to go ahead and go from left to right. In fact, in all of these steps, we move from left to right. So 2 plus 15 gives me the 17, minus the 8 gives me a final answer, 9 here. So what did I do? Step 1, I checked for parentheses. And there were none. Step 2, I checked for exponents. I did all of the exponents and rewrote those. And I did that from left to right, except there was only one, so that was all I had to worry about. Step 3, I checked for multiplication and division. I performed that from left to right. And again, there was only one, so that's the one I did. And then last, I looked at add and subtract. And there were 2 addition or subtractions, and so again I go from left to right, and that gives me my final answer. The order of operations is the base on which everything else is founded in math, really, so that's why we're starting here. I hope this quick tutorial has helped you figure this out and see this in a little bit more clearer light. Thanks.